In the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic Gospel, it says, recognize what is before your eyes, and the mysteries will be revealed to you. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. Recognize what is before your eyes. And then again in Matthew, the eye is the lamp of the body. So then if your eye is clear, your whole body will be full of light. How many of you, like me, would like to have the clearest eyes possible? And we're not talking Visine eyes. We're talking clear. We've probably been there, done that, some of us. But the clear perception is what we are talking about this morning. But we tend to see what the mind can comprehend. If the mind is not looking for it, we're going to walk right by it. And so that study went on to say, how many other things do we walk right by in our life? Because we tend to see what we're expecting to see, and we tend to filter out what we're not expecting to see. There's actually a part of the brain, the RAS, the reticular activating system, that literally does this. To give you an example, if you're walking in a really loud, busy airport, and there's all kinds of noises going on, but if someone says, Jane Tinker, all of a sudden Jane's listening. If someone says Tony Alex, Tony's listening, because we're conditioned to hear our own name. If some little child says, Mama, how many mothers stop in their tracks? How many of us that aren't mothers just keep going right on by? We're not conditioned to hear it. So the reticular activating system is literally a part of the brain that is conditioned to stop and pay attention and hear what you want to hear. Now that's the good news and the other news, because what it means is we can use that to condition ourselves that our eyes could be open, that anytime I'm trying to fix something in the world, especially when I'm trying to fix you, most of the time there's a log that I need to get out of my own eye. Amen? Amen. Anybody else recognize any logs in your eyes? Yeah, we know that. So, how do we deal with those logs in our eyes? Well, the first thing that we could understand is that we all have boundaries. When I lived on Maui, when we first lived on Maui, the first year we lived in Paia, and our house was just walking distance from the water. So every morning I'd get up and go down to this beautiful little private beach and have my meditation time. And on the little walk there, every day I'd pass this pasture, this fence, and I'd see a sign that says, do not feed the horses. Every day I'd pass the sign, do not feed the horses. I'd go meditate and I'd go back. And I started every day when I'd walk by, it's as if that sign was trying to talk to me, do not feed the horses. And I would look at it, no, I'm not going to feed the horses. I'm not, I don't even try to feed horses. And I walked by and that sign kept pulling me. Stop. Pay attention. You're not seeing what you need to see. So I stopped and I looked at the sign, do not feed the horses. And then I looked around. There's no horses. And then I started thinking, and I asked Gay, I said, were there ever any horses there? Neither one of us could remember. No, I don't think there were any horses. Well, how many times do we have do not trespass signs inside of us? Because maybe when we were a little child, someone said, don't you ever open your mouth to sing because you can't sing, just mouth the words. And so now we've got this internal do not trespassing sign. Now when we sing, you go, we don't trespass. Or something happened in our life and we were really hurt and now we will not trust. Well, that's a log that's in our eye. In New York City, when the fathers of New York City were designing that town, they decided to make New York City very simple and number the streets because they knew that New York City was the place to be in the United States. And so the planners for that city said, we're going to number every street that New York City can possibly ever have, and then the last one we're going to call Boundary Street, and we know it will never outgrow this. And so they created 19 streets, and 19th Street is known as Boundary Street. And they said, New York City will never grow any larger than this. How many streets do you think New York City is? I think it's 354. It's over 350. But we have boundary streets. We have set our own boundaries that tend to be this block, these self-imposed boundaries. I am willing to trespass my self-imposed boundaries. Together. I am willing to trespass my self-imposed boundaries. Because it's not really trespassing to pass our own boundaries. To be able to see what is possible, to be able to see the kingdom of heaven here and now, to be able to recognize it, we must realize that there's a part of us that is conditioned to filter things out because of old ways of do not trespass, old boundaries that we set up. As we bring that into our awareness, we give ourselves permission to see beyond those boundaries. The way that sometimes we wind up with these logs in our eyes is when we get our just really set on something that we want. Anybody really determined and you have, anybody stubborn? Lester raised his hand. We can all tend to have that tendency at times that I just want to do it this way. Eve Hogan moved to Maui because when she made a trip to Maui one year and she met this man named Stephen, they fell in love. She lived in California and they had the long distance relationship until she knew she had to move. And so she made the move to Maui to be with the love of her life. Eve and Stephen got married and lived together. And as a young woman, Eve just had this desire, these kind of two competing desires. She had a lot of gifts and talents and really wanted to be of service to the world, but she also liked to keep up with the Joneses. Anybody else can you identify with? Yes, we all can to a certain extent in different ways. And so she had her eye on a house in Maui Meadows. Now, if you know Maui and you live on Maui, that is the place to live, Maui Meadows. So she and her husband found this very expensive house in Maui Meadows, high profile. She thought it would just be the most wonderful thing, but they didn't have enough money at that point in time to move into Maui Meadows. So she said, no problem, my family has a lot of money. I'll ask my parents and we'll just pay them back. Her husband didn't know about that, so he said, well, talk to them and we'll see. So she talked to her parents, and her parents said, well, let us think about it and I'll let you know. Now, what she didn't know is her parents called an Indian guru. Eve Hogan and her family had spent many years in India when Eve was little. And her parents had this Indian guru that they really respected, and they called him and told him the story, and he said, I'll pray about it. So that night, Eve says that she had a dream. And in that dream, she said that she was in her dream, she was back in India, and she was before this Indian guru, which she knew as a child, but now she was her grown self. And she was so excited to see this holy man that she revered. And she said the Indian guru hugged her, she hugged him, she was tearful, and he walked over and he pulled up his dress thing that he was wearing, and she said around his ankles were covered with just the most beautiful golden bracelets with all these beautiful charms hanging. And he reached down and he said, this charm is you. All of these charms represent everything I have given my life to. And he said, let's see yours. And she said she was a little shy and timid in this dream, and she didn't even know what was there, so she pulled up her pants legs, and she said she saw two really plastic, cheap-looking things around her ankles that had the address on it of the house she was planning to buy. She woke up the next morning and said, oh my God, I would be enslaving myself if I bought that house. She called her parents and said, I can't even explain what happened, but I had a dream last night and it was so disturbing, I don't even want the money. And then and only then, her parents told her what they did. Sometime later, this is Eve Hogan. Sometime after that, she and her husband found a piece of property, a huge piece of property, which is a farm, which they turned into the sacred gardens that now has this beautiful labyrinth, among many other things. They've created, she's now a speaker, an author. Can you imagine what her life would have been like if she had stayed so focused on that house and everything in her, she got that house that probably would have enslaved her. And what's right for one is not necessarily, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying the good thing is she was willing to say, what is blocking, what is the log in my eye? Soon after this, Eve wanted, she said, one morning in meditation, she saw this giant Buddha. And she said, I want a giant Buddha on this piece of property so when people walk out, they really feel the presence of the divine here. And then immediately her mind said, you can't have a giant Buddha on Maui. Well, how are you going to get one brought to this island? It's going to cost you a fortune. You can't afford it, yada, yada, yada.